Now let's take this a little bit deeper, if you're willing, because that, first of all, should dismiss this idea that Christ somehow violated, or Jesus, he violated the Nazirite vow because he had drank wine, or he drunk wine with his disciples, or he just drunk wine, or was even accused of being a drunkard by his enemies, a wine bibber, and somebody that hung out with, you know, pros and hoes and all the rest of the despised, looked down on folk. So we were saying that Nazirite, Nazareth, was a despised place, and the things of the Spirit of God are considered foolish by the natural man. Refer to 1 Corinthians 2 and 14 as a background study on that principle, thought, and idea. And as such, it was a type of inferiority. It was an inferior place. Almost, here's what is similar to the Nazirite vow. Here's what's similar to the Nazirite vow, so forth and so on, that it was looked down on. Those people were looked down on, like one with a dreadlock, one who's growing beard in a society where they shave face and clean face, one who's growing dreadlocks and growing out their hair more than a eighth of an inch from their head, you understand, was despised and looked down on. Now, Nazareth was considered a community of commonplace Hebrews or Negroes, low class, and if not disrespected people who were disrespected or disreputable people who were looked down on as nothing, as trash. This is why the comment came out of one's mouth, can any good thing come out of Nazareth? Like some even say today, can any good thing come out of Rastafari? Can any good thing come out of Ethiopia? You understand, as our nigger Jews despise the King of Kings, Haile Selassie, and all the rest, even if they have half of the story right, that the Beta Israel were black peoples. Yet, in this commonplace village, Jesus, Yehoshua, the Messiah, the Son of God, was reared and brought up. And in the seemingly mediocre mind, the Christos truth is received, Kabbalah, as well as expressed by his followers who were Galilean, who were Nazarenes, who were all from Nazareth, with one exception. The one exception of the followers of Jesus Christ that wasn't from Galilee and was not a Nazarene in that sense was Judas Iscariot, or Ascarotu, and that means of the cities. And we did a teaching on the whole paganus, the pagan, the countryside. That's what paganus mean, and the urbanus, the one of the city. The whole kind of Cain and Abel. Cain was the first Freemason. Cain was actually the first Freemason, but that was touched on in another teaching. But just to point out how Nazareth, all those who followed Christ were from Nazareth, therefore they were Nazarenes. There's nothing that say that they were Nazirite in that sense. So Nazareth or Nazirite, it typifies the commonplace mind of man, or even some will say the low downtrodden, the ghetto mind, the persecuted ones. But it is a place of development through which Christos, or Christ, the Messiah, comes into expression. Now, when we touch upon Nazirite for a moment, Nazirite, its meaning is separate, consecrated by a vow, abstinence, set apart by choice and devotion. And when we study the Hebrew, we find these are two different words in the Hebrew. What does Nazirite mean? Nazirite mean one chosen or one set apart, one consecrated to God by a vow. Samson was a Nazirite, as well as other Nazirites are mentioned in the scripture. Metaphysically speaking, a Nazirite signifies what the meaning of the word consecrated by a vow, separated, implies. The thoughts consecrated to God, to life, holy, sanctified, free from all worldliness, and from belief in error, destruction, death. One of the points relating to a Nazirite that is given more explicit directions than others is that he shall not come near a dead body under any consideration, according to Numbers chapter 6, verses 6 to 12. Even so, thoughts purified from error and given wholly or holistically to truth are entirely separated from any belief, belief, or any teaching or philosophy relating to materiality and thus to death, are separated from all destructive tendencies, especially destructive tendencies of the mind. They are fully centered in life, Hayward, and that which is uplifting and constructive. Now that's for Nazirite. Nazirite. It'll be good for us to do a little study on that and actually show how the two words in English are similar, but in the Hebrew they are different. Here we go. And doing just a little bit of research for this, we just noticed something again, that actually it should be spelled Nazir. Let's see, King James spelled it Nazar. And this is where the chief confusion actually comes in, especially since most ones and ones were speaking koina, which is not really Greek, but they call it Greek. They say it's Greek. It's early Greek. It's common Greek. It's ghetto Greek. And but they were speaking koina Greek. Koina actually comes from the Macedonian language, from the tribe of Dan. But that's a whole other point right there. But the confusion is when you look at Nazar, right? And then if you look up in a good Bible concordance, branch, a good example of how the two words get confused, how they sound similar, is with the word holy. If I said holy, which holy am I talking about? Could you tell? Which holy do I mean? If I write down, I say I'm writing down holy, and I write it down on a piece of paper. Can you tell which holy I mean? Do I mean WHOLLY? Or am I saying HOLY? Or am I saying like a slang, like something that's full of holes, so it's holy in that sense? Which holy do I mean? Just by saying holy, which one? What's the first thing an intelligent person, wise person would be like, can you give it to me in a sentence? Like a game show. Can I get it in a sentence, please? You smarter than a fifth grader? But that's the same thing with Nazir and Nazarene. This is where one of the big confusion, this is why we have to study. The Bible tells us to study and show ourselves approved, and His Imperial Majesty even tells us and reminds us, the children that is, that education is the key, because we need to be educated about this. We need to study and show ourselves approved. But now when we go to the book of Isaiah, you understand, or Isaiah, Isaiah, chapter 11, verse 1, we find a very interesting phrase. And this is where the reference that let's bring the scripture back here. Again, it says, he shall be called a Nazarene. The whole verse says, and he came and dwelt in a city called Nazareth, that it might be fulfilled, which was spoken by the prophets. Pay attention that it doesn't say by the prophet. This is where a lot of people get it wrong. They think it says the prophet, like one prophet. But it says that it was spoken by the prophets. He shall be called a Nazarene. Why? Why is that so? Many Christians, and we did some research and looked this up, a lot of early Christians, well, when we say early European Christians, so we're not going back to the beginning of Christianity, they understood it then, but early European Christians who were, trying to co-opt Christianity as, the European Christian, religion and stuff like that, the Gentiles, in other words, they had trouble with really understanding what it meant there, and there was a common association that, well, it must mean that he was a Nazirite, especially when the King James Version have it Nazarite when it should be Nazirite if you really are looking at the Hebrew, but they were looking at the Vulgate. But when you go to Isaiah 11:1, here's one of the places where it was spoken by the prophets, one of the prophets, when it says, "And there shall come forth a rod out of the stem of Jesse, Isai, and a branch shall grow out of his roots." Now, if you look at the Hebrew, you will find that the word for branch is netzer, or re. If you look at Nazirite, it's NAZIRITE, right? So we have a te and a z sound and a te sound. But that te sound is not so